Hello, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to my live. So, what are we going to talk about today? Well, I get lots of questions on adoption, and I get lots of questions on the CSPA. So, I thought I would explain a little bit about the two, explain what the priority is of each, and how you might work through both of them. Okay? And then what I'll do is, after I'm done explaining that, I will go back to all of your questions, if there are, and I will answer them. And it could be on anything on immigration law. I mean, obviously, if you have follow-up questions on the adoption, then you can do that. If you have follow-up questions on the CSPA, you can do that. But if you have family, employment, removal, naturalization, appeal, waiver, all that stuff, go ahead and ask those as well. Alrighty. So, when one adopts for immigration purposes, we're not going to talk in this particular episode about the Hague Convention, but if you do adopt, then the first place to start is to see if it is a Hague country or not, if they are a treaty to the Hague Convention, because that changes everything and adds about $20,000 to the adoption process. Okay, just letting you know. But generally speaking, when you adopt for immigration purposes, the adoption has to be final before the child turns 16. If the adoption becomes final when the child is 16 years and 3 days, garbage. Okay? So it needs to be done before. And there are countries where it takes a long time to do the adoption. Okay, so that's the most important thing. Next, you generally have to have 2 years of physical presence with the child in order to do the adoption petition, okay, for immigration purposes. So which is different than the adoption itself, which means that, for example, if you lived with the child from, when he or she was 3 years old to 5 years old, and you can prove that, that's one thing. But if you're just deciding to adopt some child and you barely have any living with them, then you might have to do the adoption first. You might then have to go live with the child for a couple of years. Then you might do the petition for adoption after that. Okay. Now, the CSPA, what is that? Okay. The CSPA is basically when you lock in a child's age such that even if the petition takes longer than when the child would no longer be considered a child under U.S. immigration law and would age out normally, that the CSPA doesn't look at that, but looks at the immigration age under the CSPA, and if qualification exists, then that person can come in and be petitioned as though they were a child, no age out. And many times that, number one, saves the petition. Number two, it saves years of waiting time, sometimes more than a decade if it's done properly. Now, where is the confusion between adoption and CSPA? Okay. A lot of times people will think that the CSPA is the most important and that as long as, the adoption goes through, for example, before the child ages out to 21, that they can use the CSPA in order to save the petition and make the family-based adoption petition go forward. And that's not the case. When you are doing adoption and CSPA, the number one most important thing is the adoption. CSPA won't even be looked at unless the adoption is proper and legal. So if you don't have an adoption that is finalized before the child turns 16, the CSPA is not going to save you. The CSPA is not going to help. Okay, that's Child Status Protection Act. That's not going to help. That is subsidiary to the approvability of the adoption itself. So don't even worry about the CSPA until you have a valid adoption, okay? Once you have the valid adoption, you can then move forward, do the family petition. And like I said, there's the 2-year requirement that you have to live. So sometimes you'll have to live with the child after the adoption in order to meet the petition requirements. And maybe the child will be 18 or 19 when you actually submit the petition. And maybe when everything goes through, the child's going to end up being 21 or 22, in which case it's no longer a child under immigration law. It's a son or daughter, in which case you can't do an immediate relative adoption petition. Okay? And so what will happen is if you do the adoption right and then, file everything and the child ages out, the CSPA then comes into play and you might be able to use it depending on the facts, the circumstances. There's all kinds of mathematical things that have to be done and facts that have to be pulled in order to see if it works. Some people, what they'll do is they'll want a consult, 5-minute consult. They go, I need to know if so-and-so qualifies for CSPA. And they expect over a small little consult that I'm going to be able to say yes or no. Okay. I need to pull the I-130 petition. I need to see how long it has taken for approvability. I need to look at the actual age. I need to see if anything was done once the visa number was current. There's all kinds of mathematical stuff that needs to be done. So that, in essence, is what I'm talking about with the CSPA and the Child Status Protection Act. 1, do the adoption, make sure it's legal, then see if you qualify, do the family petition, then if there's an age out, do the CSPA. Okay, a lot of times if there's an age out, the consulate will just deny it, okay, or say that this is moved to another preference, come back in 10 years. So the CSPA a lot of times has to be generated by the person who thinks they qualify, which for my purposes means the attorney of the person who thinks they qualify. So let's say I do an analysis. It looks like they qualify for the CSPA. I then write the consulate with a description letter and law as to why I believe the CSPA applies, why the denial was incorrect, why the case needs to be reopened. Okay? All right. Now, let's go back and see if we have any questions today. Okay? Let us see. Okay. Be patient. How's everybody doing today? Good? All right. Let me see. Okay, so I have to scroll one by one. If anybody knows an easy way that I can just press a button and see all the questions right then and there, let me know. So far, I haven't been able to do that. By the way, just as an aside, you know that the U.S. Supreme Court just ruled that in Los Angeles it's okay for the roving ICE patrols to look at the color of someone's skin, the job they do, and the low wages that they may make in that job, and then arrest them in order to find out if they're legal or illegal. I don't know how else to describe that other than to say it's sickening that the Supreme Court made such a ruling. Now, obviously, there was 6-4, 3 against, and 3, there was a burning dissent, which essentially says the exact way I feel, and that they being the 6 conservatives, have given the go-ahead for racial profiling. What happened to the Constitution? What happened to equal protection? How could the Supreme Court possibly rule that it is okay to racially profile somebody in order to arrest them to see if they're here legally? It's unreal. It won't be forever, though. Okay? Eventually we'll have a new president. Eventually we'll have a new justice. Eventually, there'll be a different makeup of the Supreme Court. But as of right now, they seem to not only ignore the Constitution, they trample all over it, and they pretend it doesn't exist, and they make up laws and rules to fit their own agenda. Okay, there. I've said what I had to say. Okay? Don't get me started, although I got me started in that one, so it's my fault. Okay. Let's see what we have here. 1 second. Okay, this is from Murad. Hi, I entered with a visa. I broke my visa. I don't know what you mean you broke your visa. I applied for asylum and U visa. Can they deport me? I think what you're trying to say is you entered with a visa, it expired, and you're here unlawfully, and now you want to apply for asylum and the U visa. Well, the answer to whether they can deport you is yes. Okay? Merely applying for asylum and merely applying for the U visa doesn't give you immediate protection from deportation. Now, asylum, if you're in removal proceedings, does create an automatic stay of deportation. And generally, if you're applying for asylum affirmatively at the asylum office, generally they will not deport you during the pendency of the asylum. The U is a completely different thing. I would have to ask you, though, what makes you think you qualify for asylum and the U visa? Okay, were you a victim of crime? Was it a specific crime that qualifies for the U visa? Did you cooperate with the police? Do you have the letter of certification from the police? Do you have an NTA, the notice to appear to be in removal proceedings? Has it been more than a year since you entered? If so, why didn't you apply for asylum before you got, before that year ended up? And what grounds exist now for asylum that may not have existed before? Okay, lots of questions. But that's what I do, okay? Let's see. All right, moving down. Okay. Murad says, yes, I will do everything you say. That's good. You should also give me a call, because I don't know if you're trying to apply for asylum in the U visa yourself, but immigration's not your friend, okay? The prosecutor on the other side's not your friend, okay? You need someone who knows what they're doing to help you. Okay. Well, it seems like it's Murad Day, because here's another one. You applied 10 years ago. You applied 10 years ago for the U visa, right? Okay. I'm assuming that's what you're saying. Assuming you did, obviously you're seeing how long it takes to adjudicate the U visa. If immigration comes to your door and tries to deport you, don't sign a thing, no matter what they say. You can be nice about it, and obviously don't run, because obviously these, masked men with no badges or anything, like the Gestapo, they're violating the Constitution up and down these days. But don't run, because they have no hesitation about tackling you. But you can be polite and say, I'm sorry, my attorney told me I'm not supposed to sign anything, but I'll be happy to sign it when I talk to my attorney, if my attorney says I should, okay? And if you have to go to detention and have someone call your attorney, then do it, okay? That's how it is these days, all right? You should have a packet ready so that if you do get taken, immediately you know what attorney to call, you know who to call, meaning your family member or somebody okay? All righty, let's see. What else do we have here? Okay, I think that's it. Yeah, it's been Murad. It's been your question day today. This has been the Murad Q&A day. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay. Well, anyways, that's gonna call it for the live for today. More on the next one. Everybody have a good day.